Hello and welcome to Moments in History. I'm Linda Shenton-Matchett, author, speaker, and history geek. While researching my stories, I unearth tons of intriguing historical information that doesn't end up in my books, so I've created this channel so I can share those with you. I really appreciate you stopping by. Logistics are everything in a time of war, and especially important is the treatment of wounded personnel. Over the course of World War II, the medical system was honed to ensure effective and efficient handling of casualties, with each facility having specific roles and responsibilities. After the individual was treated by a medic on the battlefield, he was transported to a battalion aid station, which was usually only a mile or so from the front. He would then go to a clearing collecting station 2 miles from the front, followed by a clearing station 4 to 10 miles from the front. The next step in the process was to send the wounded individual to a field hospital, which was often where surgery occurred. Illnesses and less serious surgical cases were treated at evacuation hospitals, the next facility in the medical chain. Located in combat zones, evacuation, surgical, and convalescent hospitals were mobile and typically assigned to field divisions. These mobile hospitals were equipped with sufficient tentage for sheltering patients. However, whenever possible, advantage was taken of any opportunity to occupy and utilize existing buildings. The task of the evacuation hospital provided near the front facilities for major medical and surgical treatment of casualties, received from the division, corps, and Army clearing station. Designed to combine and concentrate the evacuees so that mass evacuation by common carrier could be undertaken economically, they also provided the opportunity and facilities for the beginning of definitive treatment, the sorting of casualties, the return of those men soon fit for duty, and for extended evacuation of certain patients to general hospitals at some distance to the rear. Evacuation hospitals were 2 types: 400-bed semi-mobile and 750-bed mobile. Convalescent camps were located in the vicinity and were part of hospital centers. They relieved the general hospitals of the necessity for caring for patients no longer requiring hospital treatment, but who were not quite fit for duty. They handled cases of individuals who would probably fully recover and be ready for duty in 3 to 6 months. Normal capacity was 3,000 patients, but if necessary, installations could be expanded to accommodate 5,000 patients for a short period. Fixed military hospitals, identical in times of war or peace, served for the definitive treatment of patients. They were established in the zone of interior and in communication zones. These included general hospitals, station hospitals, hospital centers, and convalescent camps and centers. Now let's move on to the 96th Evacuation Hospital that was activated on the 5th of August, 1942. Initially designated the 8th Surgical Hospital, it was renamed as the 96th Evacuation Hospital 9 days later. Initial enlisted personnel came from a number of different geographical locations, and they came to Camp Shelby in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. During the next few months, the unit and its personnel underwent rigorous medical training at Shelby before being moved to Camp Polk, Leesville, Louisiana, and finally to the Kisatachi National Forest, also in Louisiana, where the organization went through the rigors of rain, wind, heat, snakes, flies, mosquitoes, and wood ticks. In October, they returned to Camp Shelby, and by January of 1944, they were ready to undergo final tests, watch must-see movies, and attend lectures. After this, the nurses were sent to Camp Kilner in Stelton, New Jersey, where they received their orders. Their sailing date was canceled, and the hospital finally departed Camp Kilmer by train, destined for the New York port of embarkation, where the unit boarded the troop ship Aquitania and set sail on 21 February 1944 alone. By all reports, the trip was uneventful, and the ship reached her final destination, arriving in Port Gurrock, Scotland, 7 days later. The unit moved through Glasgow, Scotland, and further on to England via train, experiencing their first actual taste of K-rations. On March 1, 1944, the 96 were then subjected to 3 months of training exercises, including classes, field demonstrations, and road marches at Crewkerne, Somerset, England. Practice drills also occurred, as were preparations made for the move to France. Finally, on June 11th, they received orders of all vehicles and personnel were to be moved to the port of Plymouth, where they remained until the 15th of June, when personnel and supplies were taken to the embarkation area and life preservers issued. They were put on the troop transport Javelin and landed on Utah Beach the following day. The life as a mobile hospital began. From Utah Beach, the unit traveled by truck to the 128th Evacuation Hospital, located in France, where within 24 hours they were set up and functioning in the fields west of town. It is believed that the 96 was the 5th U.S. Army evacuation hospital to land in France, and the 5th to open and start operations on the continent. On July 24th, the unit departed for Le Forêt. During the 50-mile journey, the unit was reinforced with nurses and auxiliary surgical teams from the 41st Evacuation Hospital. A day later, they headed to a new location in the vicinity of Margny, and by noon had reopened and was ready to receive its first patient. 3 weeks later, a movement order was received, and the unit relocated 30 miles away in Bois-Yvon. By 10 o'clock that night, the hospital was again ready to receive patients. Alas, a week later, orders came through to move again, and they embarked on a 180-mile journey across France to the Sinoches concentration area, where the 1st U.S. Army was assembling hospitals and other medical units. Then it was on to Belgium. They went through Dinant and Liège before stopping in Eupen, where members bivouacked for the night in a building occupied by the 2nd Evacuation Hospital. By this time, the unit had covered 400 miles in just under 48 hours. It took 2 days to find appropriate areas for final bivouacking in nearby Monzen, where they stayed for almost 2 months. Next stop, Germany. An advance party was sent ahead to clean and prepare the buildings in the vicinity of Aachen, Germany, and the unit made daily trips with equipment and supplies, with the final lot of personnel and equipment arriving on November 21st. The hospital was ready for operations the following day. This made the unit the first evacuation hospital to officially enter Germany. All of December was focused on treating casualties from the Battle of the Bulge. A bright spot was Christmas celebrations with the American Red Cross representatives. By all reports, although much nearer to the front lines, the organization felt much safer than in Monzen. On 27 December, they received orders to move back to Belgium, where they landed for 2 weeks in Velm, and then it was on to Spa, also in Belgium, to help further battle casualties from the Bulge. The unit arrived and established a functioning hospital inside what once had been Belgian cavalry barracks. And through the use of Sibley, or sheet iron stoves, patients and personnel were made as warm and comfortable as possible. Members of the unit recollect being extremely busy during their stay in the spa, with the majority of patients being either frostbite or trench foot cases. It was later realized that the 96th Evacuation Hospital had been the first evacuation hospital in the Bulge, and that during the first week of operations they were a mere 8 miles from the front line. During this time, the 96 was established in unsanitary riding halls, cavalry barns, and operating facilities in empty stables. On February 15, 1945, the 96 was then garrisoned at Dolheim, Belgium, with headquarters and billets for the enlisted personnel and in a church and school building in town. Nurses and officers were billeted in private homes, and this was the first time the unit had encountered these luxuries which the private homes provided. Unfortunately, the stay in Dolhane was relatively short, lasting only 13 days, until the unit was ordered to relocate in a former girls' school, again in Germany, this time in Eschweiler. The first patient in Eschweiler was received early on March 1st, 1945. 10 days later, the 96 closed as an evacuation hospital and reopened on March 12th as a provisional convalescent hospital. Rather than the frantic pace they'd been keeping during moves, they took a leisurely 4 days to move to Dunskoven, Germany, situated on the west bank of the River Rhine. The unit set up under canvas. Then, not quite 3 weeks later, they prepared for the first air move of an Army evacuation hospital in Europe. Numerous correspondents and Signal Corps photographers showed up to capture the event. The aircraft took sufficient personnel and equipment to act as a guard on the forward airfield, and on the following day, the remaining staff and equipment were moved. The unit opened that same day, again as a tented hospital. Nurses were billeted in German Weather Bureau offices, and officers and enlisted personnel were again in German cavalry barracks. Treatment was mostly of displaced persons and POWs. 15 days later, they were again air transported to various locations, however, and reassembled at their final destination of Nadelben on April 17, 1945. 2 days later, the hospital was once again open and ready to receive patients, operating out of abandoned Luftwaffe buildings. On May 9, 1945, VE Day was announced, and the hospital continued to operate before making its way back to Belgium. In October 1945, some of the personnel were transferred to the 53rd Field Hospital, while the majority were sent home. However, easier said than done, and it would be December 16, 1945, before they arrived at Camp Patrick Henry in Virginia to be demobilized. Are you as impressed as I am at the fortitude of this group, representative of the many men and women who served in medical capacities during the war? I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you want to learn even more history, please stop by my blog found on my website at www.lindashentonmatchett.com. And please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and podcast channel to see and hear new episodes that generally release on the second and fourth Friday of each month. Thank you for being here. Have a great rest of your day.